This place is laden with memories. In the 18th century, two armies fought each other here in a battle that forever changed the course of history on this continent. When the smoke lifted, the two commanders, Wolfe and Montcalm, lay dying, their destinies intertwined even in death. New France had fallen. British North America was born. It would have been easy, even predictable, to just leave it at that. The usual conquest scenario. The vanquished are assimilated, their language eliminated, their faith prohibited, and their laws replaced. That is what conquerors did for millennia. From the great upheaval with the deportation of Canadians to the Durham Report following the Patriot Rebellion, some have deliberately sought to impose that model of assimilation, the usual logic behind conquest. And finally, that is not the path that Canada chose. And why? First, thanks to the resilience of francophones, a sometimes silent resilience, often combative, but always determined to preserve a language, a culture, and an identity. And then, out of pragmatism, the British authorities quickly understood that it is not possible to sustainably govern 70,000 people against their will, particularly with unstable American colonies to the south. So, throughout the history of this country, decisions have been made to build something different here, together. That did not always happen in a straight line. Progress was achieved through tension, compromise, and sometimes failure. But many times, Canada chose a different path.
And from that choice, initially practical, even self-interested, something remarkable emerged. Not a myth, not a miracle, but a growing commitment that coexistence could make us stronger, that we can build an identity which not only respects our differences, but also celebrates them. Un projet audacieux.
A bold vision that two peoples, recently enemies, speaking different languages, practicing different religions, living under different legal traditions, could share one country.
The Canadian philosopher Charles Taylor contends that people aren't blank slates, but that our identities, personal and national, are constituted through history. In his words, the past is sedimented in the present, and our choices are shaped by what came before. Our country was built on the bedrock of three peoples: Indigenous, French, and British. Long before the battle on these plains, long before the first French ships sailed up the St. Lawrence, Indigenous peoples were the original stewards of this land. They built nations, trading networks, and systems of governance that spanned the entire continent. The Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, and the Innu shaped this land and were shaped by it. Then the French came. They built a new society adapted to the realities of North America, shaped by the river and forest, by trade with indigenous nations, and by the determination to survive and flourish in this land. When the British came, that civilization did not disappear. It endured, and now it thrives. La Confédération est né de cette histoire.
Confederation was born of that history. One of its founding fathers, Georges-Étienne Cartier, declared at the time that Canadians were from different races, not to fight each other, but to work together for their own well-being, living side by side like big families. That pact was renewed when Wilfrid Laurier governed a country that had previously conquered his own people. It was renewed with the advent of official bilingualism. It was renewed when Quebecers chose twice to remain within Canada, believing that that partnership, in spite of all of its frustrations, deserved not only to be preserved, but also to be strengthened. The plains of Abraham symbolize a battlefield, yes, but they also symbolize the place where Canada began to make the historic choice to focus on adaptation rather than assimilation, or partnership rather than domination, and collaboration rather than division. Yes, that foundation was imperfect. It excluded too many people, and it rested in part on the dispossession of the indigenous people and the violation of treaties reached with them. But that foundation also rested on the fundamental notion that unity does not necessarily require uniformity, that we can share a country without conforming to a single identity, that our differences, recognized honestly and managed respectfully, are a source of strength. That choice has resonated throughout our history. It resonates in the choices made by newcomers from the four corners of the globe who choose to settle in Canada. It resonates in the choices made by each generation determined to continue to build, not through bloodshed or on land, but on something more demanding and more sustainable, a common commitment to live together, to accept our differences, and to seek the common good. And thanks to each of those choices, Canada has become a richer, more inclusive, and fairer country.
What makes Canada a great country? It's a great country for everyone. It's the greatest country in the world to be a regular person. You don't have to be born rich or to a landed family here. You don't have to be a certain color or worship a certain God. Canadians believe in the value of every other Canadian, their boundless potential to make this great country even better. Our ancestors, despite their differences, believed in each other and in us. Now, there are long periods of history where these values can prosper unchallenged. Ours is not one of them. Our values must be fought for. That's what we are doing. That's what Canadians want. Canadians are up for it. Our history traces an arc of broadening inclusion from biculturalism to multiculturalism, from being British subjects to becoming Canadian citizens, from being two founding peoples to being many peoples living in true partnership with Indigenous peoples. From William Lyon Mackenzie King's social citizenship to Louis Saint Laurent's liberal internationalism, from Diefenbaker's One Canada to Pierre Elliott Trudeau's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Brian Mulroney's environmentalism to Justin Trudeau's pluralism and reconciliation. Each generation of Canadians has built a modern, progressive, liberal state that embraces the values of caring and sharing, of equity and fairness for all. Institutions make up the body of that progressive state, but our values are at its heart. Institutions, from the civil code to public health care, from modern self-government agreements to Parliament's recognition of the Quebec people as a nation. Values of inclusivity, fairness, solidarity, sustainability, and ambition. Canadians are inclusive. We know our country is stronger when everyone belongs, when newcomers are welcome, when minorities are protected, when Indigenous peoples are true partners. That commitment to inclusion was institutionalized, first in the Bill of Rights and then embedded in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It was manifest in our adoption of multiculturalism, first as policy and then as law. In the same spirit, the enshrinement into law of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples reflects our fundamental commitment to reconciliation and to respecting Indigenous peoples as equal partners in building our country together. And inclusion means going beyond the protection of rights to the commitment to creating a society in which everyone can flourish. That's why we introduced the Combating Hate Act, to preserve the freedom of people to practice their faith and culture without intimidation, harassment, or violence. Les Canadiens et Canadiennes veillent les uns sur les autres.
Canadians take care of each other, particularly in tough times. And that spirit of solidarity inspired the foundations of the modern welfare state in the wake of the Great Depression, particularly unemployment insurance, family allowances, and old age security. New institutional pillars based on that solidarity were added with the creation of the Canada Pension Plan and the Canada Health Act. I am proud, you are proud, that we have broadened those foundations in recent years with the National Dental Care Plan, child care services, the pharmacare program, and the National School Food Program. In Canada, it's when we are united that we are strongest, when we look after one another and ensure that no child, no family, that no one is left behind. That spirit of solidarity and generosity helps to define our identity as a nation.
Canadians believe that fairness includes equality of opportunity, so that every Canadian has a shot at a good and fulfilling life. And the foundation of this commitment is access of every Canadian to comparable public services, particularly education and health care. These commitments were institutionalized when equalization was first introduced in 1950 and then embedded in our Constitution in 1982. And by protecting services like childcare, dental care, pharmacare, we strengthen the sense of security that Canadians rely on every day. A strong and united Canada stands up for families and workers and protects those who are most vulnerable, whether they're a newcomer, a person with a disability, or a member of the two-spirited LGBTQI+ community. Now, friends, the advent of artificial intelligence will simultaneously challenge fairness, inclusion, and solidarity, while it creates enormous opportunities for how we live, work, and play. And these tensions can only be reconciled if AI works for all. AI can provide powerful solutions, better health care, better education, better government services. It can empower Canadians with new skills for more fulfilling jobs. But realizing that potential will require fundamental reforms to our education system, how we do skills training, and to our social welfare system. Our upcoming AI for All strategy will begin to tackle these challenges to maximize the potential of AI for all Canadians. Le développement durable assure l'équité entre les
Sustainable
générations.
development ensures equity between generations. Canadians are the stewards of a vast and valuable land, and we have taken steps to protect that land through international treaties, such as the Acid Rain Treaty and the 2015 Paris Agreement, as well as through constant progress when it comes to preserving our natural heritage, consistent with the commitments we made at the Montreal Conference in 2022. In the coming months, our government will implement new, ambitious plans intended to accelerate sustainable development in this country, reduce energy bills for families and businesses, and protect Canada's natural wealth.
Canada is ambitious. Canada is an ambitious nation of builders and explorers. We mapped this continent before the Americans had even left St. Louis. We built a transcontinental railway in 5 years, the St. Lawrence Seaway in 4. We created a healthcare system that became a model for the world. This government, Canada's new government, shares that ambition. We've already removed all federal barriers to interprovincial trade, and we're catalyzing hundreds of billions of dollars of investments in nation-building projects. We're doubling our defense spending by the end of this decade. And we're working to ensure that core Canadian capabilities, including in AI, in quantum, in cyber, and critical minerals, will maximize the economic benefit for Canadians of these new security imperatives. Now we need to execute fairly and fast. Les valeurs canadiennes telles que l'inclusion, la solidarité,
Canadian values like inclusion, solidarity, equity, sustainability, and ambition are not abstract ideals, but practical guides that are an integral part of our identity. Our job is to take inspiration from them in order to continue to build in these revolutionary times. At times such as this, Canada must play two roles simultaneously. First, it must be a bastion of security and prosperity for our citizens. We must defend our sovereignty, secure our borders, protect our communities, and build an economy that offers opportunities to all Canadians.
That's why we're undertaking the strongest tightening of the criminal justice system in generations. It's why we're making the largest investment in defense in generations. It's why we're securing our borders through more CBSA agents and greater surveillance resources. And it's why we're building one Canadian economy and launching nation-building projects that will connect and transform our country. We will give ourselves far more than any foreign government can ever take from us. A core mission, while we're doing that, a core mission of our government is to lower costs for Canadians. That's why on day one we canceled the divisive consumer carbon tax. That's why we've cut income taxes for 22 million Canadians. It's why we've cut taxes for first-time homebuyers. It's why we reduced tolls on the Confederation Bridge and Atlantic Ferry fares. It's why we're launched, and we have launched, Build Canada Homes, to build affordable housing construction at a pace not seen since the end of the Second World War. This past fall, we launched the automatic federal benefits for up to 5.5 million low-income Canadians to ensure that our most vulnerable get the money to which they are entitled. We also made the National School Food Program permanent so that kids have the nutrition they need at school. We've started, as we mean to go on, with a relentless focus on improving affordability to help Canadians get ahead. I said we had to do two things. The first is to be a bastion. The second is to be a beacon, an example to a world that's at sea. In a time of rising populism and ethnic nationalism, Canada can show how diversity is a strength, not a weakness. In a time of democratic decline, we can show how rights can be protected and equal freedoms endure. And in a time of rising walls and thickening borders, we can demonstrate how a country can be both open and secure, welcoming and strong, principled and powerful. There are literally billions of people who aspire to what we have built: a pluralistic society that works, a public square that's loud, diverse, and free, an economy that delivers broadly shared prosperity, a democracy that chooses to protect the most vulnerable against the powerful. Now, Canada can't solve all the world's problems, but we can show that another way is possible, that the arc of history isn't destined to be warped towards authoritarianism and exclusion. It can still bend towards progress and justice. There you go. Nous ne faisons aucune illusion.
But we have no illusions. The world is increasingly dangerous and divided. The former alliances are now being redefined and, in some cases, broken. In this new era, Canada's leadership will be defined not only by the strength of our values, but also by the value of our strength. We are moving forward with the greatest strengthening of our military and security capabilities since the Second World War. We have the resources that the world needs. We have the necessary talent to change that potential into growth. And we have the ambition to meet the challenges of this new era. We are consolidating our strength within our own borders and strengthening our resilience by diversifying our partnerships abroad, thanks to a cross-cutting approach that defends our values and advances our own interests.
So let me return to where I began, where Canada began. 267 years ago, this ground was soaked with blood. Two empires had collided, one had prevailed, and the question was, what will come next? The answer that emerged slowly, imperfectly, not without struggle, but unmistakably, was cooperation, partnership, a shared future. That response was not inevitable. That response was chosen. Chosen by British administrators who eventually saw the wisdom of cooperation. Chosen by French Canadians who eventually committed to build within the new reality. Chosen by the founders of Confederation who believed that two peoples could become partners in one country. And chosen by every subsequent generation who built on that foundation. Les traces de notre passé sont ancrées
The traces
dans
of our
notre
past
présent.
are anchored in our
Dans nos
present,
deux langues officielles,
in our two official languages,
dans notre système fédéral, dans notre
in our federal
compréhension
system,
grandissante de la
and
notion
in our increasing
d'appartenance.
understanding of the
Nous sommes
concept of
désormais
belonging.
les gardiens
We
de cet
are now
héritage.
the stewards of that
Et il est
legacy,
de notre
and
responsabilité de
we
la
have a
faire
responsibility
fructifier,
to help it to
puisque
grow,
nous avons la chance de
because
le faire.
we have an opportunity to do so.
In this time of great consequence, we are choosing. We are choosing to work together to build one Canadian economy. We've made great progress over the past year. Now we have to redouble our efforts with the provinces and territories. We're choosing to find new markets and develop new partnerships. We've announced a dozen new economic and security partnerships across 4 continents in the last 6 months. More will come, all will deepen. We choose to build in solidarity with Canadian workers, creating hundreds of thousands of good-paying union jobs, and investing in apprenticeships and skills training so that young Canadians can have the careers of tomorrow. On choisit de bâtir avec des ressources canadiennes.
We are choosing to
À
build with
l'aide de
Canadian
travailleurs de
resources,
technologie et de matériaux
with
canadiens.
Canadian
Nous
workers,
serons
technology and
nos
materials.
meilleurs clients.
we will be our best customers, and to build sustainably, because we know that fighting climate change is both a moral duty and an economic imperative.
We're choosing to build inclusively, in full partnership with Indigenous peoples, inclusively to ensure that AI benefits all Canadians, to respect diversity, to accept others, and to combat hate so that every Canadian feels free to be themselves and can thrive in the greatest country on earth. When we live our values, we grow as individuals and we build as a people. When we're kind, kindness grows. When we're united, unity grows. When we're Canadian, inclusive, fair, ambitious, Canada grows. Canada and the United States have built a remarkable partnership in the economy, in security, and in rich cultural exchange. But Canada doesn't live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian. Nous sommes maîtres chez nous. C'est notre pays.
We are masters in our own home. This is our own country. It's our future. The choice is up to us.
Bright future, worthy of the ground on which we stand. We choose Canada. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
All right, that is Prime Minister Mark Carney speaking to Canadians, speaking before those are members of his cabinet. He's going into a cabinet retreat in Quebec City, speaking on the Plains of Abraham at the Citadel, recognizing that history in French and in English throughout that speech that he gave. This is his first speech since speaking to the world at the Davos World Economic Forum in Switzerland, saying that a growing commitment of coexistence could make us stronger, that we can build an identity which not only respects our differences but also celebrates them. He went on to say, what makes Canada a great country? Canadians believe in the value of every other Canadian, their boundless potential to make this country even better. Our ancestors, despite their differences, believed in each other and in us. There are long periods of history when these values can prosper unchallenged. Ours is not one of them. Our values must be fought for. That's what we're doing, and Canadians are up for it. He said, Canadians are inclusive. We know our country is stronger when everyone belongs, when newcomers are welcomed, when minorities are protected, when Indigenous peoples are true partners. He went on to say, a core mission of our government is to lower costs for Canadians, and he referred to cancelling the carbon tax, to cutting income taxes for 22 million Canadians. He said, and this harkens back to what he had to say in Davos just a couple of days ago. He said, Canada must be a beacon, an example to a world at sea. In a time of rising populism and ethnic nationalism, Canada can show how diversity can be a strength, not a weakness. In a time of democratic decline, we can show how rights can be protected and equal freedoms endure. Canada cannot solve all the problems, the world's problems, but we can show that another way is possible, that the arc of history isn't destined to be warped towards authoritarianism and exclusion. It can also bend towards progress and justice. And the CBC's Olivia Stevanovic has been listening in, and she joins us live from Quebec City. So, Olivia, tell us more about what stood out to you and just the location of this speech.
Yeah, of course, Andrew. You can't ignore the location here. We are in the Citadel in Quebec City, which was built by the British in anticipation and in case there would be an American invasion. And of course, with threats being continuously made against Canada's sovereignty by the U.S., you can bet that's top of mind for so many people here. And something that looms large as cabinet meets over the next 2 days here in Quebec's capital to lay out the vision for the return of Parliament. And while Carney was giving his speech here, Andrew, he was surrounded by his ministers and secretaries of state, and the room was extremely packed with staffers and reporters. We heard from reporters who tried to shout questions to the Prime Minister following his long speech, but of course he did not stay to answer any of them. Carney has not answered any questions since he delivered his speech before the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, one that's drawn a lot of praise, that speech, but also criticism from not just U.S. President Donald Trump, who has gone on to criticize Canada, but also domestically here by conservatives, for example, who are criticizing Carney for not matching his words with action here at home. And what we heard from the Prime Minister in this speech, it almost felt as though it had speech from the throne vibes, if you will, and it almost felt like a rallying call to Canadians for national unity and for support for his government's vision. Carney laid out a number of priorities that he wants to focus on. Of course, the international issues being a major concern, finding new trading partners, dealing with the U.S., but also kitchen table issues that Canadians are dealing with, affordability being a major one, and one that this government continues to face criticism from the Conservatives over, and you can bet that's going to continue when Parliament resumes and returns from its winter break on Monday. And Carney said in his speech there, Andrew, that he wants to, that the government needs to execute fairly and fast, but that remains a challenge since we are in a minority government situation, and we haven't heard any sign yet that the opposition is more willing to cooperate when Parliament returns than it was before they went on this winter break, Andrew. So that will remain a challenge for the government going forward. But we did hear clear examples from the Prime Minister there about what he wants to focus on over the next 2 days as he puts his heads together with ministers and secretaries of state. And they hear from experts who've been brought in from a number of different areas, including finance and global affairs, to help them navigate these troubling times.
Yeah, because, Olivia, it just can't be understated, right, in terms of the times that we are in, the turbulence of just this new year, 2026. We're only 22 days into it. So much has happened on the world stage, so many threats to Greenland, frankly, to Canada. We heard from the U.S. president how he didn't like what Mark Carney had to say, and navigating all of that and then the next challenges ahead, right?
Yeah, of course, and we heard from Trump just yesterday. It's hard to believe because so much has been happening, but Trump just said yesterday, taking a jab at the Prime Minister, saying that Canadians should be more grateful and that Canada lives because of the U.S. is something that the U.S. president claimed. Now, reporters tried to get a response from Carney, and we're hoping to hear from the Prime Minister, at least put questions to him about that, but they weren't able to get an answer from the Prime Minister today. And again, the Prime Minister has not answered questions since he delivered his speech before the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. And one of the main questions as well is what will now happen with the Canada-United States-Mexico agreement known as CUSMA going forward. Where are we at in terms of the review? Can we still potentially, work with the Americans on this, given everything that Carney laid out on the international stage in Davos? And now he's following up on this with his message to Canadians today. So there's still a lot of questions that the Prime Minister needs to answer, frankly. And we are hoping to get a chance to hear from cabinet ministers, though, a little later on today. They are just starting to arrive, Andrew, and they are expected to take questions from reporters throughout the day.
And as much as this speech was very serious, we're showing a little bit of a lighter moment there with the Prime Minister before delivering the speech, being welcomed by, you'll recognize him, Bonhomme, of course, because this is Quebec City, and the carnival it's either on or it's going to be on. I'm not exactly sure, but that is Bonhomme welcoming the Prime Minister at the Citadel. Okay, Olivia, thank you. The CBC's Olivia Stefanovich live in Quebec City. Oh, and getting a hug too. There you go. Let's get the thoughts of the CBC's chief political correspondent, Rosemary Barton. She joins us live from Ottawa. So there, a lighter moment, but the speech was very serious, and I think you'd agree, Rosie, and it spoke historically. It was a patriotic speech, but also recognizing the challenges that the country has faced in this extremely historical place.
Yeah, and there was a lot of history in there in case you hadn't taken a history class lately or needed a reminder of how Canada was founded. But it was the last paragraph, I think, that was important to highlight for people because, in fact, it was a direct response to Donald Trump. And it wasn't in the prepared remarks. It was added in. I'm not sure if it was ad-libbed or added in, but the Prime Minister has talked about the strong economic relationship with the United States, but then he went on to say, in direct response to the president, Canada doesn't live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian. We choose Canada. So we had been trying to get him to respond to the comments from the president. He clearly knows what he said and wanted to make it clear to Canadians that, again, that kind of remark, while he is highlighting the partnership that Canada and the U.S. continue to have and continue to want to have, let's be clear, that kind of remark is probably not entirely helpful in this moment. And the Prime Minister, again, sort of laying down his own markers about what matters. And I do think when Canadians hear the president say those kinds of things, whatever they mean, it is important for leaders in the country writ large to sort of stand up and say those kinds of things, as the Prime Minister did today. He, as Olivia said, did talk about some of the things that the government has started doing and some of the things they want to continue doing, and did, again, mention that those things have to be done quickly. And I think that is sort of where the rubber hits the road a bit for the Prime Minister in this minority government. Increasingly less of a minority, but still, it is challenging. Many of the things that he was able to do on the world stage over the past 10 days, getting rid of tariffs on certain products, getting commitments on allowing Canadians to visit China, getting investment commitments from Qatar, those are all deals he can make, right? A legislative agenda where you have to go through the House of Commons, you have to find ways to work with other parties. That is much more challenging for this government and for this Prime Minister. And so the speed at which he wants to do things, I think, is being tested, not only by world events, but also by the restraints that he has, the limitations he has inside the House of Commons as it gets back to work on Monday.
It's interesting. I think you're absolutely right, Rosie. I was reading the speech, and that is not in the prepared remarks, but I have, a transcript now of exactly what he just said. And he said, when we're Canadian, inclusive, fair, ambitious, Canada grows. Canada and the United States have built a remarkable partnership in the economy and security and enriched cultural exchange, but Canada doesn't live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadians. Because, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There are a lot of Canadians, when Donald Trump says something like, Canada lives because of the United States, might object to that, as you say, whatever exactly that means. Some would take that as just meaning, oh, well, Canada has prospered because of the United States. Others would take that, given how threatening Trump has been towards Greenland and also towards this country, as a very threatening remark for him to make. And it's almost like Carney felt, I think, the need to add that in, just have some kind of response to, the few remarks that Trump yesterday had to say about Canada.
And I mean, and while I'm teasing about the history lesson the Prime Minister gave, that also factors into things. For many Canadians, sometimes they define themselves as Canadian in relation to not being American. But as the Prime Minister sort of laid out how this country was created, those three founding peoples again, it is a good reminder of the marked differences of how this country came to be, and the things that distinguish us from the United States, particularly in this moment, but from the very beginning, in fact. So that all harkens back to some of the same messages that he was giving in Davos. It was a very long speech. I will also say that. It was a very lengthy speech. And I don't know whether it delivered on sort of explaining to Canadians the things that still need to get done by the government. So that would be sort of the question I would raise there, whether it got to that point quickly enough, and whether it did enough work in terms of messaging government action. Because while that might sound really inside baseball, that is very often where governments run into trouble. They're doing things, or they're trying to do things, and if Canadians don't see them and feel the things that that governments are doing, they start to sort of raise eyebrows. I do think a lot of the country understands what the Prime Minister is up against when it comes to Donald Trump, and are willing to allow for some time and have some patience with that, because it is so unpredictable and chaotic at times. But if they're willing to give him time on that front, I think the patience on the other things might run out a little faster.
Interesting insights. Rosie, thank you. As always, the CBC's chief political correspondent, Rosemary Barton, live in Ottawa. Let's return to Lori Turnbull. She's a professor of political science at Dalhousie University. She's joining us from Ottawa. Maybe let's pick up a little bit on what Rosie pointed out quite rightly, because I have the prepared remarks, and that was added in or ad-libbed, we don't know, but that Canada doesn't live because of the United States. Clearly, this back and forth between Donald Trump and Mark Carney continues.